All right, so welcome back to our next installment. We have a very special guest joining us today, Country Rav. So I'll hand it over to Lee, who's going to moderate this talk, and we'll see how we go.
Country Rab, thank you for joining us during the day. It's quite a pleasure to have you. Today, I wanted to suss out some of our thoughts on censorship. Now, censorship has been sort of an evolving topic over the last few decades or so. Originally, there was sort of like an understanding of what constitutes appropriate use of censorship. For example, in the media, you don't talk typically about the KKK, for example, because you don't want to give them exposure, even though they're alive and well in the States. And that thing has sort of changed nowadays when we look at censorship. I'm curious what your guys thought about. Is it really objective? One perspective it is that censorship is typically something that just impacts the right side of the spectrum a lot more than the left, right? And then there are sort of charges of hypocrisy going back towards the left. So that is sort of like where I wanted to start out with. Country Rab, did you want to go start with your thoughts on that, or did you have any? Do you want to push it someplace else?
Well, Mr. Doucet, excuse my French. Let's go ahead and call you Lee. That's a name that Country Rab knows how to say awfully well, courtesy of the old General Lee. We know what he did back in the South, right? But touching firstly, Mr. Lee, is that what a lovely Rico Suave looking hat you got there. I see lots of brown fellas south of the equator have this hat, make it look awfully good. Fits quite nicely on yourself. Very, very handsome, stylish accessory for yourself. But talking about the topic at hand, I know front in mind, we had this situation up here in Canada. As you know, my name is Country Rab, but I've been hailing from the Great White North, and we had ourselves a little swing with some truckers coming from the west of the country over to the capital city of Ottawa. Kind of became the darling news story of the world for a couple of weeks there. I'm sure you guys remember, and the topic of censorship was very much alive and well. So I wouldn't mind just keeping it a little bit local here in the Canadian politics, start with the truckers, and then move down to the US, where we got all kinds of scenarios with the social media. Not sure what that is, some sort of Zuckerberg and the Gates and the 5G, and I don't know, with all this stuff going on. But let's start up north and then work our way down south a little. How would you guys say about that?
All right, that's perfectly reasonable. Justin, would you like to just quickly jump in first and then hand it off to Country Rab, or did you want Country Rab to take the poll?
Country Rav's our guest, and I think it makes sense. Let him have the lead on this.
All right.
Well, to give our viewers a little bit of a explanation of what happened if you were inside a hole or all of a sudden some faraway place with no access to the CNN news media, or I'd like to say in fake news, as my friend and savior Trump could be saying. But what happened was we have all these kinds of crazy laws here in Canada. We got some sort of sniffles up here, and then they're going down and locking everything down, going ahead and attacking Section 6 of the Charter, and just going ahead and generally disregarding our Canadian Constitution for the last year and a half. Now, one of the points of contention was even late stage in this pandemic, what you had Trudeau going ahead and asking Biden to go ahead and match his regulation of having this vaccine for these truckers going back and forth between the Canada and United States. Now, here's the dilly of a pickle. We have Mr. Trudeau, who was asking the government of the United States to go ahead and match their laws so that Trudeau don't seem like no dictator. Now, that is a very contentious point. The U.S. was not going to go ahead and go do this rule. Trudeau intervenes, asks the U.S. They go ahead and do that. Truckers are like, hey, there's already been a year and a half of this. We got over there in Europe, and they're going ahead and opening things up, saying goodbye to the mandates. And we have here in North America adding mandates. So they went over to Ottawa. They blocked those roads. They said, we want to meet with the government of Canada. We want to discuss opening up so that we can once again be free and fair Canadians. No second-class citizens here. Don't matter your skin color. don't matter your creed, your religion, it don't matter your medical status. You were all free here. And this is the country I was born in, that my father was born in, that my grandfather was born in, and that's the country I'd like to return to. So that's a little bit of a background on the truckers. Now, what do you guys have to say with your experience? Mr. Lee, I know that you were talking to me earlier, a few weeks ago, about some happenings over in the Windsor Bridge. Like, do you have something to say about the Ottawa, or do you have something to say about the bridge part? Because they're two separate parts, both very important.
So I see we have a esteemed guest plus moderator. I like it. Um, no, so obviously being in Windsor, my opinion of I have separate opinions for Ottawa and Windsor. I think with Windsor, it was very challenging when you block something and impact the local livelihood of people here. There's a lot of different families across the different social economic range that are sort of struggling right now in the pandemic. So any sort of hit against them, because what happens, it's not just like a store is closes. If people can't bring their parts in, they shut down work for the week and people just don't get paychecks. It's a little bit different versus like other areas, though the gist is like still the same. I don't really support any sort of stoppage, maybe a day or something. I could see, okay, make your point. But I think any prolonged siege was definitely a bad idea. Because I'm going to pass this off to Justin, but see, I think the important part when unpacking all of this is sort of like public perception, and it changes, right? Like I think my thoughts are that I think people generally don't agree with everything is being said. I think it's just about to what degree of that, right? Like with me personally, it's a contentious issue, like not widely agreed upon. Is I don't think people should be fired for not getting a vaccine. Maybe in some instances they should get fired, but I think those are few and far between, right? But talking to other people, they clearly, I've observed people not believing that. But right, and so it's about the sediment that. Justin, with regards to your own thoughts or maybe public opinion, like what do you, as a landing point, what do you think?
Well, the topic that piques my interest specifically is the idea of freedom. And I think that by virtue of having traveled and lived for some time in different countries, I have somewhat of a frame of reference of what freedom is like in different countries, or how it's manifested. And I think that Canada as a social welfare state, I'm not sure exactly in principle how free we are, even before the pandemic or the vaccine mandates. Just by virtue of when a government has quite a bit of power and influence in the day-to-day life of people, um, just by virtue of how politics plays out, that impacts how free we are. So maybe we might want to define or suss out more about what freedom means to us, or what's the definition, what does it feel like, what does it look like on a personal level or a societal level. But I can tell you, I've been to other countries where I would say that they're more free than we are with regards to how the interactions play out with the government, and how I think also the role of government also plays out in terms of how laws are enacted or managed or enforced. So I think in a lot of countries where the government is not as powerful or integral to day-to-day life, then there's a lot more leeway, or there's a lot more interpretation, or just a lack of enforcement of law. And depending on the context, you might think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or in some arenas of society that's positive and others negative. But freedom, to me, it seems like a very interesting concept to talk about.
Country Rav?
You guys touched on a whole mess of good points there, and I just been nodding my head. My neck is starting to get a little bit sore. I'm all about this freedom and all about these anti-mandates, and it's reminds me of what Canada used to be before the big. vid? I don't know. But talking about the protests, I was at the protest there in Toronto, and having gone through these people, I got to feel like I was proud to be Canadian for the first time in a few years. And I felt like being there, seeing those people together, really putting freedom at the forefront, something that has never been an election issue here in Canada, but with the CBC doing recent polling on what is the most important election topic for you, you have freedom as the #2 topic in the upcoming election, which has never been discussed before. And that just says that this is what's on the minds of the voter. And yes, maybe 70% of people wanted some sort of mandates and lockdowns, but when you're giving people all kinds of fear through this media misinformation about going ahead and highlighting certain points, get money from the government, which is now admitted by both the Canadian and the US government, giving millions of dollars to corporations and to influencers and to universities all across the country in order to provide information on that most recent government policy, which we are discussing through through the medications and the pharmaceuticals, of which has been such an important topic in these last few years. But you have a lot of Canadians, at least when I go on the internet and I'm going through the comment boards, and this is going through both the right wing and the left wing publications, and you have a whole lot of comments thanking them truckers for reminding Canadians what it's like, what that freedom and that our charter and that our constitution needs to be first and foremost, and that these government lies of safe and effective that now have been proven wrong, that we need to make our own decisions. I take a little bit of that personal responsibility that I ain't heard too much about when I was a little one, right? Because my parents and my family, they just expected that of us, right? You need to get up, you need to do your chores, you need to get to work and serve your family first and foremost, and then go on and have some fun. But now people just want to have fun and then forget about all that work and all that hard stuff. Well, that hard stuff is what makes you a man or a woman or a family man, any kind of man. That's what Country Rise has to say about that.
Very
So-
interesting.
Country Rav, so you mentioned about freedom, and I want to hear more specifically about what does that mean? And as a side note, you can address this or not, but I'm curious, before this whole mandate era, let's say, did you identify or see any lack of freedoms, or did you see this coming, that this could have been a possibility? That's a side note, but primarily I want to hear, what is freedom? What is the definition? When people say that's what's concerning to us regarding an election, what are they referring to? Is it like freedom of choice? Maybe a reduction in intervention by the government into daily lives? What does it mean?
Nice open-ended question there, Mr. Justin. And I'd have to say, but my thoughts on freedom is that, yeah, you need to be able to look after yourself and those around you without the interference of a big brother type. And we've had that in the last couple of years has been an impossibility. Can you believe, and I'm talking about to all our international listeners here, but up here in Canada, we had to have capacity limits even on your personal gathering. That's right, the government's saying who you can get together with in your own private time. This goes directly against our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, another thing, that the ability to travel, even currently right now, Country Rav, might not look like it, but once in a while, I've been outside this great country and I got to see how great this country really is. And I'd like to really much go back and travel. But right now, they're saying for some medical reason, I can't do that. But when you have a lot of the data that's coming out, it says, well, don't really help the stop of the spread that much, don't really help a lot about saving the people's lives, as you have it in the UK. 93% of people are the ones that are dying that got this going ahead, this gosh damn therapies. And when you have that, when it's both not being safe, not being effective, and you're attacking our rights, you have people like myself and them truckers, who I'm going to keep referring to, they're kind of like my guardian angels. They're greasy, flying all over the place, having the real freedom, kind of like the bikers. But we went ahead and we lost that. This is not the Canada that my father grew up in. This is not the country that my great uncle went and fought them Nazis overseas. This isn't like my great grandmother, who was a Native American. This is not the country that they came to learn, and we need to get back to it. Now, to go ahead and reiterate, there's a great flag over in the United States. I believe it's called the Gadsden flag. I'm not sure, but it's got a snake on it, and it says, "Don't tread on me." And that really speaks to Country Rav. It's like, don't get in my business. I won't get in your business, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that we're going to get through this together, through taking care of ourselves, taking care of our neighbors, but don't tread on me.
All right.
So Country Rav, so when would you say this shift happened? Was it all of a sudden, or was it building over time? When you speak about the yesteryears of Canada, when there was more freedom, or you'd like to go back to that point, I'd like to know from you, when is that point, and how did we get from there to here?
Well, Country Rav, you see, being the self-proclaimed expert in whatever field that I decide to be talking about at the time, I have what yourself is an professional opinion, professional to me, okay? And if you're listening to it, you can decide whether to accept it or not, but this is my own personal expert opinion. Now, can I reiterate the question, please?
Yes. So the question is, you mentioned about in Canada's past was more free than it is today. So my question is at what point was there a shift? Was it gradual, or was it all of a sudden? And roughly, when you refer to Canada being free, to what point are you referring in our history?
Well, there's been some major shifts of late, but of course, nobody could have predicted anything that happened in 2020. So if you be asking Country Rav, did you expect the country and the world to shut down for a year and a half over some sort of little critter that was some sort of 0.026 percentage points, numbers that are too small? Country Rav could barely put the fraction in it. No. Country Rav definitely never saw that coming. But what you have is a whole lot more empathy, and these feelings and image is so much more important. It's more about looking like you're doing the right thing than actually doing the right thing. And here we got to see a whole lot of it here in Canada, with our politicians not being able to stand up to daddy government and say, no, my people, they want to be free. No, not even the Kennedy, not even the Ford of the Albertas and the Ontarios, large conservative leaders that got elected on these platforms of freedom and economic prosperity. But as we saw, these leaders are walking in lockstep, which is a new term being said quite frequently on the mainstream media, also from the Rockefeller lockstep plan. I suggest you boys look that up if you want to get on them conspiracy pages. But you need to, you just need to. Lost my place once again, gentlemen. I had a little bit too much sarsaparilla early this morning, and Country Rav just gets a little bit lightheaded. I start talking about freedom, and I get all red in the face, matches my hat, and I get all angry, and I get all excited, and I'm just so happy to be with you boys here. Thank you for inviting on Country Rav. The fact I lose my place once in a while, and kind of look like a little bit of a fool before you city folk, with all your fancy degrees and them books and all that city living and all that dirty air. Well, over here, Country Rav is just clean living and clean breathing, and
And
Looking to
pigs.
spread a lot more of that in my life.
It's good. Justin, did you want to follow up, or should I go on?
Oh, okay. I'll take one more stab at it. Just one last question. So, Country Rab, would you be happy to go back to how Canada was 2019? Is that a time where you feel like you'd be proud to be Canadian and that you'd be comfortable again?
Wait.
Is it?
He might still be proud to be Canadian, right? So.
Well, as of right now, laws are still lagging behind the European world, and they say that those socialist fellers over there, there's some sort of educated thinking, they know what to do. So when I see them dropping them mandates and dropping them masks, even for flying in those whirlybirds up there, but no, it's yeah, in 2019, 2020, I was still proud to be Canadian. It's just when you lose the things of which freedom and equality used to be the #1 tenets of Canadian society. I don't know if you guys know this, but over there by Toronto, there's one of the most multicultural cities in the world. Right? You look a lot around the faces, and they don't look like me. Sometimes they'd be brown, they'd be black, they'd be yellow. They'd be looking from all over. I've seen all these crazy flags that I know is not the Canada, it's not the U.S. So I don't know where they're from, but they're from somewhere weird. But they got tasty food and they got the wild music, and the whole situation works out here in Toronto. But when you have these governments saying that with this long-term tested therapies that they want to go ahead and put laws defended by guns and prison and fines, destroying one's personal reputation, relationships destroyed. And then towards the end, when you realize the public opinion is just starting to change, you're going to be like, nope, we want to come and bring it together. We need to quit this decisively. I'm sorry, Mr. Trudeau. I'm not going to call you a dictator because you got elected with 32% of the vote, roughly. But no, you don't speak for all of us. And when you were elected to be a Canadian leader following the Canadian Charter and our Constitution, and people seem to have forgot about that. So yes, Rav was mighty happy in 2019. Rav was mighty happy for the first half of 2020. But then when you have that very key moment in the spring of 2020, and you found that the vast majority of cases were asymptomatic from the studies over there in Spain, and then the big study over there in California, you realize that most of the people who get sick never really show they're sick. They go ahead, they get the virus, and then they're all done. They don't even feel it, and they got those natural antibodies that I hear about, those nice, strong, robust antibodies. But our governments here in Canada and the United States, they went and they never even acknowledged the natural immunity. Now you have universities and public health officials from all over the world, especially over there in Europe and Israel, where we get our best information from, and they're saying, hey, natural immunity, much stronger protection, much longer lasting. They all say that. But over here in North America, we don't go ahead and acknowledge it. So you got some funny business between our elected officials, the pharmaceutical companies, and the overall overreach of the government. Do you believe that people were going around with these little phones that they keep in the pocket, cell phones, I think they're calling, they're going over to stores and they're showing some little box with some lines on it to get inside? Like, this is not Germany 1930s. We don't go ahead and show our papers to go in somewhere. Even when you could have that newfangled natural immunity that I hear so much about. But so Rav was much happier in 2019. Rav was always for freedom, but I never had my government at my door saying your career options, your travel options, your religious options, your gathering options are now second place to this overarching authority of which I don't agree. And looking at for my own personal responsibility, knowing the risk, looking at the studies, I can read an abstract just as much as any politician can. It's just a plain English. They go ahead, they got the paper, they give the reason, and you read the reason. There, that's it. But you have the pharmaceutical companies going ahead and not releasing the raw data immediately and only releasing the abstract. So you only have a little portion of the scenario. And that, my friends, is not freedom, because we're having limited information in order to make decisions. And in Canada's case, a lot of the time the government's making that decision for you, even though they say you're your friend, they really got a knife at your back.
Well, the important thing to think about. We're running close to the hour, so I'm going to ask you two questions. Number one, just I'm curious about. And number two, have yourself a glass of water. You can go on with a strong finish if you would so like. Thank you,
Stuff
Elon
yourself a
Musk.
little cigarello here while you guys go ahead and do your show hosting duties. You go right
Yeah.
ahead. I'm gonna sit
So-
back and take a minute.
And quick question. So when you were talking about the lockstep of the Liberals and the NDP, referring to the Liberals making 32 and sort of saying with a negative connotation to them sort of dictating the majority. But wouldn't that also go to the Conservatives in 2018 when they grabbed about 40, but they actually do control a majority without having an actual majority itself? Did you see a comparison in there, or is that apples and oranges?
Well, you have both cases, which happens in the Canada and the United States, where you have one politician losing the popular vote and another one going ahead and winning the election. Now, I believe that this is actually important, more so in the U.S. than here in Canada. But what you have is called proportional representation. All right, we don't live in a direct democracy here in Canada. We are a monarchist republic.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that all right, but in the United States, you have a constitutional republic, and this what allows is these city centers, otherwise known as city slickers, on the east and west coast, or in Canada in the Golden Horseshoe, going ahead and dictating policy for the entire country. So I do believe in the proportional representation of the people, and I do believe direct democracy can be dangerous for those reasons. People in big cities making laws and making rules for the rest of us simple folk when they live in very different circumstances. The urban versus the country, very different lives.
So, there's a difference between, I just want to be clear on the difference between direct democracy and representational. So we currently have a direct democratic system? No.
Representation. I believe we have a monarchy.
Yeah.
We have the queen at the top,
Yeah.
a republic. And then in the United States, it's a constitutional republic, of which they do not serve a king or queen. It's to the Constitution of the United States.
Right. I'm fairly clear on that difference, but I thought we were making a comment about how prime minister or president can be elected without having a majority vote, right? And that's the point that I'm curious to talk about.
Country Rav does not have a problem with that, but what you get is you get leaders in power, and they go ahead and control an entire nation on a minority of people. And that just rubs some people the wrong way. Now, Country Rav here, he understands that the different votes mean different things in different places to different people. But you do have a leader in charge here in Canada with a low 30% type of the vote. And not everyone is very happy about how the job that he's doing. Conservatives are believing he's being too authoritative. And then you have these crazy NDP green folk who thinking that we need to shut down for the environment, raise taxes, and just stop all our living just in case every little bit of this virus goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to bounce, as you can probably see, but I just wanted to ask you a quick question, Country Rav, before I go. And so when you talk about the data and a few other elements especially being proven wrong, I'm just curious what the severity are you referring to? Are you referring to on one side like general incompetence, or something more sinister like intentionally misleading, or are you just referring to they tried their best with what they knew and things didn't go as planned? In your own words, of course. I'm just curious which one of those two camps.
This is a great question, and this is one that I've been thinking about since this entire debacle. And I say debacle because in Canada here, we borrowed the most amount of money in the world in comparison with our GDP. So if you're talking about the country that went ahead and reacted the strongest, perhaps maybe otherwise for laws, maybe Australia, but who spent the most money, paid for people to stay at home, Canada is #1. Now, you're talking about a specific question about the data, about a little point that I brought out. Well, here's the point, and we're finding out a lot about the real answers to the question. I know we're kind of diverting from our topic of censorship, but this is called a censorship of data. Now, the governments early in the world were presented with an option from the pharmaceutical companies. The first big ones early on were the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, and the Moderna. Now, what I was saying was that our elected officials never got to see the raw data. All they got to see was the abstract of the studies that these pharmaceutical companies were providing. And they got to make their own interpretations of their own data for a product that they were going to sell. Now, what's very interesting, this is a multifaceted question that could go on for some time. And I understand that you have a little on there who would probably look also just as good with your hat over there. But I will just go ahead and go quickly here. But some of the tenets here of these agreements, now they are secret agreements, but I went ahead and got to read a couple of the Pfizer ones that some of the countries who did not accept their terms released to the public. So some of these terms in these contracts, one of them being whatever you agree to buy, even if you do not take ownership of these products, whatever you agreed to buy at the beginning of the contract has to be fulfilled no matter what. So Canada was the #1 country in the world for these pharmaceutical products on a per capita basis. We agreed to buy these sight unseen. We didn't have access to the data. The companies said, you can't have it, but trust us, it's good. So we went ahead and bought these, as well did over 150 countries in the world. Many countries did, because they did not have the full information at the beginning. So no, I don't think it's some sort of grand arching conspiracy or anything like that, but I do believe that it was a very uncertain time, and you have these large pharmaceutical companies realizing that they have a market opportunity in this situation. They made these contracts airtight. I will go ahead and highlight a couple other points. One was that this company could not be sued for any side effects, no matter what. Also, much more of the data was not going to be released until much later in time. These contracts were very standard, and they were very iron tight, and these countries signed on ahead of time before knowing.
Country Rab, I have to go. It's getting too distracting. It's not fair to Country Rab. I hope this was a very illuminating conversation. I hope it's not the first time we were able to host Country Rab.
The last time, right?
Mighty fine there, gentlemen.
Not the last time. This is the first time.
Oh,
And,
sorry, I'm very distracted now.
I'm very happy that Mr. Justin here isn't saying that he's being uninvited for future episodes. This is mighty fun, and I just get caught up in all the hijinks talking about freedom and mandates with you gentlemen. And I would love to have to give my own Southern opinion, Southern Canadian opinion, but you know, on another topic.
All right. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Country Rap, for coming on with us. And
Uncle Justin.
thank you very much.